Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, shehakol niyeh bidborei. L'chaim. L'chaim, everybody. L'chaim. Life. Good tavach. Shavua tov, a good week. We start off a new week with a new book. Vayikra. Vayikra means, and he called. Which is an unusual term. Usually God speaks to Moses, Vayidaber Hashem al Moshe, Vayemer Hashem. And here's he called. He called with a great loving kindness. And what did that produce in Moshe? Being called in a loving manner. So the aleph in the word Vayikra is a small letter. It caused humility. Which is interesting. You would think when God Almighty is calling you, oh, look at that. God's calling me. Ha, ha. I'm special. He called me, didn't call you. Right? I just had dinner with my grandson and grandchildren, and so I said, how did he call? Did he use the telephone? Did he use the smartphone? So it created a humility, which is interesting. How so? Why so? How do we look at sin? What does that create in us? A sense of humility? A sense of culpability? A sense of guilt? What does it produce in us? So, the third book is sandwiched between the first two and the last two. So what do you have in the middle of the sandwich? You have the goods, right? You have the salami, you have the pastrami, the corned beef, the meat, right? Well, the third book is about meat. The sacrifices, the offering, the meat that's put on the altar of God. That's this book. And it speaks about many different types of offerings. Today we're going to look into a particular form of offering, try to understand it, take it apart, and of course, what's the lesson for us, most importantly? As Torah is all about the lesson in our lives. So the Torah speaks about the Sanhedrin, which is the Jewish High Court, who makes all of the rabbinic rulings. And if they made a ruling that the community, Jewish people, have to do such and such, and they ruled erroneously, and as a result of that, the nation sinned, the people sinned, they did something wrong. So the ruling is that the Sanhedrin, along with the congregation, is required to bring a korban chatas. Korban is a sacrifice. Chatas is from the word chet, a sin offering, we would translate it. And it's called a communal sin offering. So this is in the fourth chapter that discusses this. And let us turn a moment here. Sorry. All right, let's share the screen. You see text number 1 in front of you? Beautiful.
Yes.
Wonderful. As always, I have difficulty to make it larger. But as Diana always tells us, you could do that yourselves. Okay, for this week's Parsha in chapter 4 says, and if the entire community of Israel errs because of a matter was hidden from their eyes of the congregation, Sanhedrin, meaning of the Sanhedrin, and they commit one of all of the commandments of God that may not be committed, incurring guilt, when the sin that they had committed becomes known, the congregation shall bring a young bull as a sin offering. They shall bring it before the tent of meeting. He shall do to the bull just as he did to the bull of the sin offering. Thus he shall do to it. Thus the Kohen shall make atonement for them, community, and they will be forgiven. And he shall take the bull outside of the camp and burn it, just as he burnt the first bull. It is a sin offering for the congregation. So the Rambam goes through the process, something that we learn in Rambam. Rambam goes through the details, and he says the High Court inadvertently erred in their ruling and ruled that a forbidden substance is permitted. Right? They said that this, thing is permitted, and in the end, it was really forbidden. They made a mistake, and people ate from it. The community ate from it. Then, as a result of their ruling, the people erred inadvertently and acted in transgression of the prohibition while relying on the ruling of the court. Thereafter, the court discovers they erred. In such a case, the court is obligated to bring a sin offering for their erroneous ruling. So the court is bringing it because they made the erroneous ruling, right? Even if the judges themselves did not perform the deed in violation of the prohibition, they must bring this sacrifice. For we do not consider the deeds of the judges at all, what they did or did not do, only their ruling, right? Their ruling was wrong. For that alone, they have to bring the sacrifice, even if they didn't eat, let's say, the non-kosher meat, because they gave a ruling that it was kosher. People are exempt from bringing a sacrifice as individuals, even though they performed the transgression, because they relied on the court. Which sacrifices they bring for this erroneous ruling? Every tribe must bring a bull as a sin offering. The sacrifice is mentioned in the verse, and the entire community of Israel inadvertently errs. Each one, this week's Parsha, Leviticus 4:13, each one of the bulls is called a bull brought due to a lapse of awareness by the congregation, as the verse states. The congregation shall offer. Every congregation, every tribe is referred to as a congregation. So though it was the members of the Sanhedrin who are obligated to bring the sacrifice, it's not the people that bring it. The Sanhedrin, the high court, they bring it, but it's still considered the sin offering of the congregation, right? That's what the Torah is telling us. So this is an important detail, as we're going to see shortly. Okay. Now, in bringing an offering, any offering, right? It's not about getting through it. Let's just get it over with so we can go and, do our thing. Today we have prayers in the place of the sacrifices. So many people prayers is something like, you go through to get to the other side, like we have one congregant that often will come into services as, Rabbi, what time of the service is over? Right? Meaning, when are we going to get through this? So we're on the other side of it. And many things in life we feel about in such a manner. But prayer shouldn't be that way. Prayer is something to live through, not to get through. Right? And likewise, when it comes to sacrifice, it's not something to be on the other side of it, to get through it, to be on the other side. The offering that a person brings is meant to bring a great sense of remorse for what you have done. And particularly here, we're talking about a sin offering, that by bringing the animal on the altar, it brings out emotionally by the demonstrative manner of a slaughter, the blood and the meat on the altar, to bring us to this great deep remorse, as the Ramban Nachmanides explains in his teachings. Ramban says a person must think throughout the process of bringing this sin offering that they have sinned before God with their body. And really, it is their blood and their body that ought to be spilled and burnt on the altar. It is only out of God's kindness that he accepts the sacrifice in the sinner's place. So that's the mindset that one is to have by bringing an offering of a sin offering. So accordingly, the question is then, why must the community be part of this sin offering when it is not their sin that was committed? Yes, they did the act, but they did it in complete innocence. It's the Sanhedrin that erred. They're the ones who made the mistake. They're the ones who were not careful in the ruling. So they're the ones, and solely the ones, that should bring the sacrifice. The community, they were just following orders.
We're in partnership with God.
I mean, that doesn't explain it. Yeah, I mean, it's true what you're saying, Andrew. No argument there. What does that mean exactly? In what way did you partner in, you're just following orders? I mean, the offense, the culpable wrongdoing is on behalf of the Sanhedrin, the high court. Right? In the end, they're the ones who have to bring the offering. It's their offering, but we're saying it's on behalf of the community. So it's an atonement for them, the entire community. What did they do wrong? I just did what I was told. L'chaim. So hold on to that question. And even, Andrew responded, not incorrectly, but let's get a fuller picture. Okay. The answer will come by picking apart more deeply Rashi on one of the next verses. So what we're going to do now is one second. No. Okay. Actually, before this, so in chapter 4, we begin with the sin offering of a Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol, the high priest.
What?
When he inadvertently would sin, the Kohen Gadol, inadvertent sin, he brings a private sin offering. He brings his own private sin offering. Then the Torah goes into what we just spoke about, the communal sin offering. When the Sanhedrin, the high court, issues a ruling in error that causes the community to do something wrong, transgressing one of the laws, they ate maybe forbidden fats when they were told they were permissible fats, for example, of some part of the animal. Right, so the judges bring the sin offering on behalf of the community. Then, after that, it speaks about a sin offering. So we go from the Kohen Gadol, Sanhedrin, and now we go to a sin offering of the Nasi. The Nasi is the head of the Sanhedrin. He is the ultimate halachic authority, communal authority. And what if he inadvertently did a sin? So he has to bring a private offering himself of the sin offering. And third point. The fourth thing is that it goes into the standard individual sin offering. In other words, a regular person, does something wrong inadvertently, because offerings on the altar are only for inadvertent sin. Willful sin, you don't bring an offering, only inadvertent. Okay? So again, the order: Kohen Gadol, the Sanhedrin, the Nasi, the leader, and then every individual. 4 different types of sin offerings. Is that clear? Okay. So here in text 4a, we have the sin offering of the Nasi, of the leader, the head of the Sanhedrin, the sort of halachic expert, the communal, functionary of making sure that the community is functioning appropriately and so on. It says, if a leader of the Israel sins and unintentionally commits one of the commandments of God, which may not be committed, incurring guilt, if his sin he has committed is made known to him, he shall bring his offering, an unblemished male goat. So Rashi comments on this. Rashi, he says, if the leader of Israel sins, why does the scripture use the word im? Like in the case of the verse 3 and 13 above. In other words, if. The answer is that the word asher is an expression reminiscent of the dictum starting with the word ashrei, fortunate. So the word asher means if. But it also has a root connection with the word ashrei. Ashrei, yeshvei, secha. Ashrei means fortunate. So what's the fortunate thing here about the sin? So namely, fortunate is a generation whose leader gives attention to bringing an atonement offering for his unintentional sins. And how much more will we experience remorse for the sins? He will remorse for the sins that he committed willfully. Wow, very interesting. So what are we saying here? Fortunate is the people, the Jewish people, who have such leaders that they are give attention to their atonement offering, that they unintentionally committed a sin, right? And that they'll even have much more intentionality when they do something willfully. So that's what it says. So 2 questions. What does it mean exactly? Fortunate is the generation who has such leaders who offer such sacrifices. What does it mean exactly? What's the fortunate thing here? And in the words of Rashi further, he adds a little bit extra about being inspired, giving attention to the offer of the sacrifice. What does he mean to say here? Fortunately, the generation whose leader, what does the leader do? The Nasi that we're talking about, who unintentionally sinned and is now bringing an offering. So that he gives attention to bringing of an atonement. What's the emphasis of giving attention over here? He brings his atonement. He brings his atonement. That gives attention to it. And if he wasn't highly intentional, what does that mean? Okay.
It minus the sacrifice when we do it not with intention. It's like with the mitzvot. When we do a mitzvot, even when we do it with less intention, but of course it's better when we do it with intention.
No, okay. So, okay. I'm not clear on what the point you're making, but
It allows us to reach the highest form of remorse. So hopefully when we do teshuvah, we won't commit the sin again. The heart will be changed
okay.
to not commit it again.
Okay, fine, good. Okay. Let's answer the first question. That was the second question. First question, what does it mean fortunate? Fortunate is a generation as leaders of such a sacrifice. So perhaps this was somewhat said now, is what's fortunate? Well, when you have a leader that is humble enough, right, to recognize their mistake, unintentional mistake, and brings an offering, what will that do for me and you? It's going to teach us. We'll do the same. So this is what Rashi is saying. Fortunate? We're very fortunate to have humble leaders who step up at the moment as necessary, own what they need to own. They bring the offering. And through that teaches us something. That teaches us that we can also be vulnerable. We can also own our stuff and bring the offering that we need to bring to God. So that's what we're learning from the Nasi, right? That's what Rashi is saying. But hold on a moment. If you recall the order, and I'll remind you, of chapter 4 of the book of Leviticus, this week's Parsha, the first thing that was mentioned was about the Kohen Gadol who did an inadvertent sin. The second thing was a Sanhedrin that erred in their ruling and therefore caused the people to do an inadvertent sin. And then the third was only the Nasi, right? The head of the Sanhedrin. So why is it that Rashi's explaining over here when it comes to the Nasi, that we learn this lesson? Fortunate are we to have such leaders, right? Well, the Nasi is not the only leader in the Jewish people. Kohen Gadol is also a great leader. He also did an inadvertent sin, right? So why isn't it we're not learning it from him? Let's go to the verse in text number 5. If the anointed Kohen sins, bring a guilt to the people, then he shall bring for his sin that he has committed an unblemished young bull as a sin offering to God. He shall take a entire bull, a pure place outside the camp, namely to the ash depository, and he shall burn it in fire on wood. Thus it shall be burnt in the ash depository. So clearly, he's doing the same thing that the Nasi is doing. But actually, if anything, wouldn't it be much more powerful to learn from the Kohen Gadol this lesson of him bringing the offering? And therefore, if he's humble and he brings an offering, all the more so that we, in our inadvertent sins, should learn from him, bring an offering. Because after all, the Kohen Gadol is uniquely very holy individual, right? And he's owning his mistakes, his inadvertent mistakes, and brings a sin offering. Definitely, we're going to learn from that, right? Why do we need to learn this lesson from the second, right? Remember the order. First Kohen Gadol, then the Sanhedrin. Okay. Sanhedrin is different because that's a communal thing. So you're not going to learn a lesson there. But the third thing is the Nasi who brings. So why isn't Rashi saying that this is a lesson that we're learning from the Kohen Gadol? Why is it the lesson that we're learning from the Nasi, who in the verses of the Torah come after the Kohen Gadol, the high priest? So obviously there has to be something unique from the Nasi that we're learning from him, that he brings an offering. He is humble, owns his stuff. And in an inadvertent sin, he brings an offering. So all the more so for us. Question
Is he
clear?
more on our level? Is he more on our level that we would relate to his being sinful?
Good question. I wouldn't say so, because we're talking about the head. Who are we talking about? The Nasi. Talking about the head of the Supreme Court, of the Sanhedrin.
Maybe he's not
Sorry, Andrew. Go ahead.
obligated to.
Hmm?
Is he obligated to? If he's doing it, is he actually obligated to? Is he voluntarily doing it under?
No, these are obligations. The four things that we spoke about: Kohen Gadol, high priest, the Sanhedrin on behalf of the community, the Nasi, right? And then the individual sins that the people do and bring a sin offering. All of them are obligations, right? They're not a free will offering. They're obligatory. Something wrong had happened inadvertently, but wrong, sinful, right? Okay, let's put that aside for a moment and we'll come back to it. Okay. When you do something wrong and you feel bad about it, what do you feel bad about? Because you got caught, right? Laws are laws. Laws are made to be broken. So you are speeding, and the police, I remember many years ago, like I would hear a siren from a police, I got a little frightened, right? Then I didn't, like the guy who goes to the bar and he takes a few drinks and then he throws a drink in the face of the bartender. And he paid for it, but he still, he does it night after night. Finally, the bartender says, go and get some help. Otherwise, don't come back here. 6 months later, he comes back. Oh, I got help, like you told me. Then after several drinks, he takes the drinks and throws them in his face. Says, hey, Jake, what's going on here? I thought you got help. Yeah, of course I did. I told you I got help. Now I don't feel guilty anymore. But we do something wrong, we feel guilty. Right? Is it because we got caught? Is that why we feel guilty? Is it because there's a consequence to the wrongdoing? Oh, she's going to be upset at me for doing that. And I'm sure I'm going to be in the doghouse tonight. Right? So in human relationships, usually, and most often, it's, it's about getting caught. You don't feel anything bad about it. But if you get caught, oh, okay. Because those laws, whether it's the law of a speeding limit, are laws that are created by life. Right? Because of life, what's life today? We live now not on farms. So we live with streets in a city, and therefore we need to have speeding limits. We have to have stop signs. We have to have lights to go and to stop. Otherwise, it would be chaos. Otherwise, people would be hurt, right? So we are trying to bend those rules, and we hope not to get caught. But then there's other types of laws that create life. And that's God's laws. God's laws are not as a result of life. God didn't tell us to put on tefillin because, life is such that you got to put on tefillin, right? Otherwise, you ain't going to have a good life. No. God's laws create life. They're not created because of life circumstance. That's a red light. But God's laws, they create life itself. So let's put now in respect to God and his law, and he did something wrong. So quite often, we have a very primitive view about when we do something wrong to God. And it's in as much the same as when we do something wrong in civil law, like, rolling stop sign, which I must admit that I'm often guilty of and hope not to get caught. Sometimes I'm guilty. Now, so why do you avoid doing the wrong thing before God? So the simple, primitive way is fear of punishment, right? We don't want to be punished by God. We don't want to suffer because of a sin that we do to God, right? We know if we do something good for God, so he'll do something good for us. If we do something not good, a transgression, we don't want to suffer as a result. Now, of course, that's very childish, very primitive. Far deeper way, a truer way to deal with God's law, which again is different than the red light. The red light are laws created by life. God's laws, they create life. So it's a very different perspective on it. Therefore, as a result, what should bother us when we do something that transgresses the law is that we're going contrary to the will of God. And that is what bothers us. That's what we feel bad about. We didn't do what he needs from me, what he wants from me. The Rambam explains this, the difference between the two ways. Rambam says a person should not say, I will avoid all sins the Torah warns against, so I will be saved from all the curses contained in the Torah, or so my soul will not be cut off from the life of the world to come. It is not fitting to serve God in this manner. A person whose service is motivated by these factors is considered one who serves out of fear. He is not on the level of the prophets or of the wise. The only ones who serve God in this manner are common people. They are trained to serve God out of fear until their knowledge increases and they serve God out of love. In fact, according to the Baal Shem Tov, when the Torah instructs us is to fear God and to fear sin, it doesn't mean to fear the punishment. Because you don't need to command somebody to fear punishment. That's a natural instinct to fear punishment. You don't need to be commanded for that. As the Baal Shem Tov says, an earthly king does not need to command people to fear him. Likewise, God does not need to command us to fear him, namely a fear of punishment. People naturally fear punishment of death or suffering. Interesting, as you probably heard from me before in study of Tanya, when we speak about fear of God, never once in Tanya does the Alter Rebbe make reference to fear of God means fear of his punishment. Not at all. Because that's primitive. That's child's play. Expanding on this idea, the Tzemach Tzedek explains how foolish it is to fear punishment. Punishment isn't a slap on the wrist, as most people look at, but it's actually it's a remedial measure. It's to heal the blemish of the sin. The real problem is sin. Sin is a sickness. The problem isn't the punishment. Actually, the punishment is the healing, right? When a child plays in dirt, they need to be cleansed. Mother puts the bath with hot water, scrubs, combs out the hair. It's punishing. It's hurtful. But that's the healing process. That's what the cleansing process is. So the punishment that we get from God is actually a cleansing and healing. If that's what you're afraid of, then that's childish. It's like, don't get sick, because if I get sick, I'm going to have to take that medicine. I hate that medicine. Yeah, but the medicine is the healing. You know why you shouldn't get sick? Because sick is being sick. You're disconnected from yourself. You're not whole. You're not complete. So it's the sickness that ought to frighten you, not the medicine. Tzemach Tzedek, a person should understand and appreciate how much they ought to run away from sin and avoid touching it with a 10-foot pole, more than fearing the punishment of sin. A person ought to fear sin itself, for the punishment is actually the cure for sin. How then does it make sense to be afraid of the cure and not of the malady itself? So accordingly, fear of punishment is really a primitive level, or it is like someone who is afraid of the cure and not the malady, which is understandably primitive. The main thing a person ought to fear is the sin itself, which is infinitely more evil and bitter than the punishment. So appropriate fear of sin is not about being culpable. It's about the impact of the sin. It has nothing to do whether or not you're at fault, sin, right? But it's got to do about the impact that it has on the soul, as the Alter Rebbe explains in Likutei Torah. He says, the true definition of sin, a fear of sin, is not the fear sin itself, which is more bitter than death, is to fear sin itself, which is more bitter than death. Death is an atonement. Sin is not. So it's more bitter. Just as the soul climbs higher or when a mitzvah is performed, so it is the contrary with evil. Sin drags the soul far, far away from God, to the extent that the harsh judgment is meted out to the sinner, which is like a cure for him. This should inspire great fear of sin in the person's heart. And as the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, in Igeres HaTshuva, chapter 7, person must be conscientious and think deeply about the impact of sin. It causes their soul to be torn away from the source of life with God and to be dragged down into a dark place of impurity and death, namely the chambers of evil. The soul is then forced to become a vehicle for evil so as to receive vitality to animate the body. Even if one doesn't necessarily commit the gravest sins, rather other relatively minor sins, it is still a travesty inasmuch as sin damages the soul. So the lesson here is that we should fear sin itself rather than the punishment. Is that clear? So with this now we can go back to our discussion of the Nasi and the Kohen. Remember we said the first thing chapter 4 deals with in our Parsha is the sin of the Kohen Gadol, the inadvertent sin. Right? Only thereafter, after the sin of the Sanhedrin, then comes the sin of the Nasi and his personal inadvertent sin. And Rashi learns the lesson from the sin of the Nasi, that he is humble to accept his mistake, bring an offering, which would, of course, lead us all to learn. And so we are ashrei, fortunate to have such leaders. Why don't we learn this lesson from the Kohen Gadol? It came first in the Torah, right? When the high priest sins, it is the fault of the people, for they are dependent on him to atone for them and then pray for them, and now he has become impaired. So Rashi explains as follows. There's a distinction between the Kohen Gadol and the Nasi. Yes, the Kohen Gadol is the high priest, Kohen, very lofty soul, but so is the Nasi, a very lofty soul. But we wouldn't be able to learn this lesson about our own individual offerings to give to God, to own our mistakes, inadvertent sins that we do, from the Kohen Gadol. Because the Kohen Gadol, in the end, who does he act for? All of us. When he brings an offering, it's an offering in the name of all of us. So there would be a problem when he does an inadvertent sin and brings an offering. Since all of the offerings that he brings, or most of them, are primarily for the community that he is offering on behalf of all of us, when he brings an offering that is inadvertent sin that he did, it wouldn't be so clear to interpret it as that he is doing a noble thing, he's owning his own sin, he's doing it only on behalf of himself, because the other offerings are not on behalf of himself. So this one, we might not take the lesson from him, that it is because of his mistake that he inadvertently did, and now owns up to it and is bringing his offering. But the Nasi, that's different. His job was halachic authority. His job is an administrative one to make sure that the Jewish people are handing down the laws and do what they need to do and whatever is necessary for the community. So when he makes a mistake inadvertently and he has to bring an offering, it's only for his own mistake he's doing it. And therefore, when people see this or hear of this even, wow, the Nasi, he brought a sacrifice for some inadvertent sin that he did. What does that do for us? It inspires us that we could also own our sins. If he did, we could too. And therefore, that will inspire us that we will want to bring an offering when the time would come when we do something inadvertently wrong. So Rebbe says in this week's Likutei Sichos, this week's teachings, this is the difference between the sacrifice of the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, and the Nasi. The high priest, the Kohen Gadol's role is to offer sacrifices and achieve atonement for the Jewish people. As such, even when the people would see him bringing a sin offering for himself, it didn't really inspire them and teach them the lesson of avoiding sin to begin with. Instead, it primarily evoked typical feelings that when a person commits an inadvertent sin, they would be ashamed to bring a sacrifice for their mistake. Because he's doing it for everybody, But by contrast, the Nasi's primary role was to lead the nation in an administrative sense. So when such a leader would go ahead and bring a sin offering, and what's more, he gives attention to bringing an atonement offering for his unintentional sin, it teaches everyone the gravity of sin itself. This teaches the people to avoid sinning in the first place. Hence, fortunate is a nation. Fortunate is a nation that has such leaders, that such leaders are humble. They are Vayikra. Hashem called to Moshe. So sometimes that calling is take ownership for your mistake. Sometimes we're called to task. And that should bring a humility, as it did in Moshe when God called him. As it does with every Jewish leader, they are there in a sense of humility, fulfilling their task, that when they inadvertently erred personally, they will own it, because they're only there to begin with out of humility, so they'll be able to own it. That's a fortunate people that we have such leaders. Ashrei Ha'am. So is fortunate the nation that has such leaders. And from those people, we will be inspired and we will learn from. And therefore, we will commit so many lesser sins as a result. With this, then we can understand the words Rashi uses. Answers the second question. Remember Rashi's extra words where he gives attention to bringing an atonement offering for his unintentional sin. So when do we learn from the Nasi in his offering? Is it by the actual offering that he's bringing an animal as a sin offering? Or is it really more about the highly intentionality of what he's doing? As we learned earlier from the Ramban, right, that this is an offering that should be you on the altar, but God in his compassion, he says, put the animal on the altar. So here is the Nasi bringing and feeling bad about what he has done, highly intentional in what he is doing, owning his stuff. He's owning it. And because it's not just a mere act of bringing the sacrifice, it's not a mere act of, let's just get through this to be on the other side of it. No. He's highly intentional. He gives attention to bringing an atonement offering for his unintentional sin. That's the point over here. That's the lesson we learn from such an individual, that he pays attention to it. Not just, let's get through and over with this. With this, and now we can go back to our original question. Our original question was, the Sanhedrin erred in their ruling. They're the ones who made the mistake. Why is it called a community sin offering? Yes, the community was involved in it, but hey, they were just following orders of the high court. They did nothing wrong. So here is the important lesson. Wrong is not about being culpable. Oh, I can point a finger. You did wrong. You're responsible. You're the guy. The boss tells his employer, says, Johnny boy, lately you've been making too many mistakes. You've got to lessen your mistakes in the work that you're doing. So Johnny says, I hear you, boss. I have a good resolution that we can come together and make sure that I do less mistakes at work. You know, usually I come 8 o'clock in the morning to work. How about I come at 10? I'll make less mistakes. That's about being culpable, right? Sin, if it's about merely the responsibility of it, so then the attitude about sin, and that's how most of us are. You did wrong. You're culpable. You're going to burn. You're going to fry, right? You're to blame. You're guilty. Can we say that about the community of Israel, that they're guilty? They're going to fry. It's something wrong. None of it, right? But that's not what sin is. It's not about the fear of the punishment, what's coming from it, that you're going to go to hell. It's not about avoiding punishment or being responsible. What happened when the Jews sinned as a community? Oh my gosh, I transgressed the will of God. It's not about the consequence of the sin. It's about who I sinned against. I did against God's will. I'm not responsible for it. Does that matter? Does it matter that I'm not responsible? The fact is, I did something wrong against the will of God. Again, what difference does it make? Responsible, not responsible. It's sin. Sin that cuts you off, that removes you from God. Oh my gosh. It's the fear of sin, of being cut off from God. That's is the fear we're talking about. It's not about the responsibility and therefore the consequence of it. That's the way of the world. Yes, the siren goes and the police are coming after you. Oh, consequence. That's only in laws that are a result of life. But God's law is different. It creates life. So therefore, when you even inadvertently go against the law of God, inadvertently, it's not even you're not even culpable for it. It's the Sanhedrin. But it doesn't matter. Still, the will of God was transgressed. Life-giving law, I'm cut off from. I'm disconnected from God, from my true self. The story of the Rabbi, I think he was 6 years old. And it was a summer, hot day in Yekaterinoslav, I guess. I'm not certain where it was at the time, where he was living at the time. And he was playing on the field. It's a little ball. I don't know exactly what. And he was wearing his tzitzis. He was wearing his shirt, and he had a yarmulke on, and he got sweated up. There was a non-Hasidic Jew. I think he was a professor, if I'm not mistaken, and was, I think, a friend of the family or something. At least knew him. Says, Yingele, nemer up, du spielst. You're playing, Yingele, boy, you're playing. You're getting overheated. Take off your yarmulke so you won't be so hot. He gets stuck under the yarmulke. And he was wearing like a big yarmulke, I guess, because he was playing or something. He says, nay, no. 6-year-old. I'm playing a little more. And so he says to him, again, the professor says to him, says, the Aveda will be on my plates, the sin will be on my shoulders. I'll take the sin on my shoulders. So little 6-year-old Mendel, the Rebbe, saying, what's the chilik of the Averas of my plates is a dime plates is? Sedach an Avera. What's the difference if the sin is on my shoulders or on your shoulders? It's a sin. Beautiful, amazing story. You see already at a 6-year-old, more mature than the professor's mind of a mature adult. What's the professor saying? Sin is only a result, results in something. So whatever the result of it, it'll be on my shoulders. And Rebbe says, no. What's the difference? Whose shoulders? A sin is being cut off. What's the difference? Me, you. Sin. It's wrong. Wrong is wrong. And the Rebbe feared the sin because the sin is a disconnect to God, from God, a disconnect of my true self. So there's no getting away with anything. Not about getting away. Yes, when I sometimes might go a little too quickly, usually use cruise control, just driving now from Toronto to Montreal back last week. So put on cruise control, but there's times, you're trying to get quicker than the truck that's on the, or another car that is whatever, and you go a little further beyond what your cruise control that you're set with, which is within, the limits and so on. And, with the hope that you're not going to be caught, because those are not laws that are life-giving. So sometimes we will, but God's laws, they create life. So by keeping them, we get life. By transgressing them, we disconnect from life. When we understand that, so it doesn't matter who did it. Something wrong was done. Period. Needs to be corrected. Needs to be fixed. Irrelevant. Nothing else is relevant but that. That's the key. That's the core. That's everything. A whole different way to look at doing something wrong. Achai. Any questions? All right. I guess it's clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Pleasure. Well, the TRC coming up.
Yep.
God bless.
Thank you.
We'll see you
Thanks,
soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you.